All right, let's dive right in. When you look at a bubbling, peaceful aquarium, you probably just see a relaxing hobby, right? But if we zoom in, like way, way in, we're actually looking at a hidden battleground. Today, we're ranking the top goldfish parasites. We're going to break down exactly where these microscopic villains come from and just how badly they can hurt your scaly friends.
There's this really common myth out there that goldfish are basically invincible. Like, you can just toss them in a bowl and they'll be totally fine. And okay, yeah, they are remarkably hardy thanks to centuries of selective breeding, but they are absolutely not immune to disease. In fact, invisible monsters could literally be hitchhiking on that beautiful new plant or that unquarantined fish you just bought. If you let them go unchecked, these invaders are going to multiply until your fish simply exhausts itself trying to fight them off. So we're counting down the worst offenders here, from bad to absolute nightmare.
Let's kick off the countdown. At number 4, we've got a hidden horror that actually attacks from the inside out. Rank number 4, internal nematode worms. These guys are the covert villains of the tank. We're talking about species with wild names like Camellinus, Capillaria, and Eustrongylides. Because they live deep inside the gastrointestinal tract, the body cavity of the fish, you usually have no idea they're even there until the infestation gets really severe. Honestly, the symptoms read straight out of a sci-fi monster movie. As these worms grow and feed inside, your goldfish might start to look super emaciated, losing weight even if it's eating. Or, on the flip side, it might get a severely swollen abdomen. And get this, with the Camellinus nematode, you might literally see smooth, red, thread-like worms visibly leaking and protruding right out of the fish. It is totally gruesome. It causes extreme lethargy and just deeply debilitates the poor host. So, where on earth do they come from? Well, a lot of these nematodes have pretty complex indirect life cycles. They sneak into the environment through intermediate hosts. Think wading birds visiting an outdoor pond or those soft-bodied tubifex worms that fish love to snack on. Once they're inside, the damage is incredibly insidious. Some of them, like Eustrongylides, will physically encysst themselves, like bury themselves, right into the fish's muscles or the lining of their organs. Others will just completely hijack the gut, causing the fish to slowly starve to death from the inside out. Not pretty. Moving on to rank 3. This is where the threats leave the internal organs and actually get large enough to see with the naked eye. Rank number 3, the creepy crustaceans. Now we're unveiling the macroscopic horrors. These aren't your standard microscopic bugs. These are highly modified parasitic copepods that physically latch right onto the outside of the fish. They are essentially aquatic vampires. Just look at the brutal ship anchor-shaped head on this female parasite. Scientifically, it's called Lernia, but most people just call it the anchorworm. She uses this highly specialized head to violently burrow deep beneath the fish's scales, right into the muscle tissue, and then she just leaves her egg sacs hanging out in the water to release the next generation. And then we have the fish louse, or Argulus. Look at the massive, terrifying suckers on this thing. These disc-shaped parasites literally crawl all over the fish's body, throat, and fins. And those blood-sucking discs, they don't just drain the fish. They actually inject toxins that cause severe anemia. But wait, it gets worse. As they hop from fish to fish, they act like dirty needles, transmitting deadly pathogens like the spring viremia of carp virus, not to mention a bunch of nasty fungi. So how do they get in? These crustacean beasts usually hitch a ride right into your pristine tank from unquarantined new fish or maybe from untreated outdoor ponds, especially during those warm summer months. The physical damage they leave behind is just devastating. We're talking deep red, inflamed ulcers, and localized tissue necrosis, basically dead tissue. Because they literally rip open the fish's protective slime coat and skin, they're laying out a giant welcome mat for deadly secondary bacterial and fungal infections. Stepping up to rank 2. We're shrinking back down in size here, but drastically escalating the danger. We're entering the realm of the invisible assassins. Rank number 2, the invisible flukes. All right, for this rank, we're talking specifically about Gyrodactylus, which is the skin fluke, and Dactylogyrus, the gill fluke. These are flatworms, barely a millimeter long, but they can rapidly multiply out of absolutely nowhere to completely overrun an aquarium. Check out the specialized weaponry on these things. Under a microscope, you can clearly see the hapter. That's a series of gruesome, sharp hooks at the base of the fluke. They use those hooks to violently latch on to the incredibly tender, highly sensitive gill membranes and skin of the goldfish, stretching out to feed on mucus and living tissue. The agonizing damage these hooks cause is just immense. As the gill flukes feed, they mutilate the gill tissue, causing it to become severely disfigured and build up this thick scar tissue. This literally suffocates the fish. You'll see them gasping, breathing super rapidly. And in response to that aggressive feeding on their skin, the goldfish's body will overproduce a protective layer. This creates a milky film that's known as gray slime disease. You'll see the fish frantically flashing and scratching against tank decorations, desperately trying to scrape these invisible tormentors off. And of course, that just leads to even more injury, scale loss, and extreme lethargy. Honestly, the scariest part about flukes is where they come from. They're often just latent, seemingly harmless residents already hanging out in your tank. But the exact moment the environment degrades, whether that's from poor water quality, overcrowding, or some sudden stress, the fish's immune system drops. And boom! That is when the flukes strike. Gill flukes are egg layers. They can drop up to 20 eggs an hour in warm water. Meanwhile, skin flukes continuously give live birth. It creates this staggering population explosion that ultimately ends in the host asphyxiating. It's a total nightmare. And now we have finally reached the top of our list, the absolute worst offender in the aquatic world. Rank number 1, the Yiddish menace. Taking the number 1 spot is Ichthyophythrus multifilialis. Try saying that 3 times fast. Most people dreadfully know it simply as itch or white spot disease. This single-celled protozoan is the undisputed heavyweight champion of goldfish pathogens. To the naked eye, itch just looks like harmless little grains of salt sprinkled all over the fish's body and fins. But look at the terrifying truth in this cross-section. It is an obligated parasite, which means it literally must have a host to survive. That feeding stage, which is called a trophont, doesn't just sit on the skin. It actively insists itself between the host's epithelial layers. It burrows right in, physically displacing and destroying the fish's cells to feed and grow. The reason itch easily takes the number 1 spot is its terrifyingly fast, wildly aggressive life cycle. So first, the trophont feeds under the skin, safely sheltered from most medications. Once it matures, it bursts out, dropping down to the bottom of the tank to form a reproductive cyst. Inside that cyst, it rapidly divides into hundreds, sometimes thousands, of highly infectious swarmers. These free-swimming parasites burst out and just blanket the tank, actively hunting for new hosts. This relentless multiplication means that if you ignore an itch outbreak, you're looking at practically a 100% mortality rate. It will absolutely wipe out your entire tank. So the crucial takeaway here is understanding exactly how it strikes. Itch is highly opportunistic. Drastic temperature shifts, or even just the stress of a long car ride home from the pet store, completely compromises a goldfish's immune system. That basically rolls out the red carpet for this parasite. And the resulting damage? Catastrophic. It causes the fusion of the gill lamellae, essentially gluing their breathing organs completely together. Add in massive cell necrosis and inflammation infiltration, and ultimately, it leads to death. Shielding your scaly friends. Okay, we've looked at the horrors, but I definitely don't want to leave you too terrified to even look at your aquarium. Let's pivot to a practical, scientific solution. How do we actually protect our tanks from these ranked monsters? Well, it all builds into a vital concept called the disease triangle. In aquaculture, an outbreak only happens when 3 things perfectly overlap. You have a susceptible host, a virulent or highly infectious pathogen, and a poor environment. Now, goldfish are naturally incredibly resilient. If you break that triangle by maintaining a pristine environment, keeping ammonia and nitrites perfectly at 0, avoiding overcrowding, preventing sudden temperature swings, your fish's immune system stays robust. A stress-free environment is, without a doubt, your absolute best defense against every single parasite we've talked about today. Which brings us to one final really important thought. When you look at your aquarium, who is actually controlling the ecosystem? Is it the invisible flukes and those hitchhiking crustaceans, or is it you? By strictly quarantining every single new arrival for at least 2 weeks and vigilantly monitoring your water chemistry, you hold the power. You can keep these microscopic monsters totally at bay. So take control of your water, protect that disease triangle, and keep those scaly friends swimming happily for years to come. Thanks for diving in with us today.